53 voter registration stations across the country couldn't open on time. It was due to service delivery protests. This while political leaders from across the board, of course, trying to mobilize the public to register for the upcoming vote. We're joined now by political commentator Deborah Haas and political analyst Professor Seape. Good evening to both of you, gentlemen, and thank you so much for your time tonight. Professor Seape, let's firstly talk about some of the action from political parties, not from political parties, rather from community members who were actively shutting down the process of registration, not allowing people to access those sites. And the majority of them really coming back to issues of service delivery that is behind why they believe there's no point in registering to vote and that people would be wasting their time if they were doing that.
Well, that's a bit unfortunate, but it also reflects how we have not defined what democratic expression entails. First, elections are a form of democratic expression, and protests are also a form of democratic expression. And unfortunately, what we have done, we've created a discourse on service delivery that vote for us and will deliver. And when there's a failure, people then get into a form of protest. But the issue that they must understand is that elections are the most potent form of that democratic expression. If you have people who have failed you, this becomes an opportunity for you to vote them out and select the people that are going to vote for you. Simply protesting and also disrupting the process, you actually undermine the very tool and instrument that is actually available to you. And especially when you deal with local government. At the local government level, you know the people in your area. You can select those people that can serve your own communities, people who are upright and who are hardworking, who have a good track record. So this is an opportunity for the people, instead of disrupting, to simply saying we are going to present better people who will carry our mandate. So this notion that you're going to disrupt is not helpful because it does not change the status quo. But it is unfortunate because we have also not made people to understand that it is not even about the house. It's not only about water, electricity. It is also about the civic duty. So those people who have all those things still have a duty to vote. You must remember that voting is a right that people died for. There was a struggle to achieve it. So we should not undermine it. But unfortunately, we've linked it only to service delivery as opposed to the civic duty, the right of citizens, but also their duty, their responsibility to make sure that the government are held accountable. So I think it is unfortunate that this opportunity is being missed.
And Professor Seape, I think you're really getting to the nub of the issue there. At a time when we're seeing such increasing declines in institutions, particularly from the public, the presence of the IEC in some people's minds is not seen as different from the presence of government, and therefore the action of shutting down a voter registration center would be the equivalent of sending a message to any other government institution about the dissatisfaction with the level of services. But how much of that responsibility rests on the IEC and its own ability to distinguish itself as an institution that is also partly tasked with, the responsibility of the civic education that you're talking about?
Well, I think you're quite right. I think the IEC has dropped the ball in terms of education about elections and about democracy. And as a result, it is seen as being in cahoots or part of government, when in effect it is an independent structure that has been put to make sure that the democracy is deepened. So that has been a failure. And this is why it's very important that we remind people that elections are the most potent democratic expression in a democracy. They allow you to choose the people that you think will represent you. Outside that, you also have other forms. Right now, protest is not going to be that helpful. But unfortunately, we have dropped the ball by always linking voting with service delivery. It's important, of course, that there must be service delivery, but we must also raise the bar so that all citizens begin to value and to say this democratic expression can lead to a better life for all. But when politicians use the opportunity to mislead, then it becomes a problem, and people then have this one-to-one correspondence that I vote, I get a house, and if I don't get a house, I don't vote. That is unfortunate.
And Tebogo, the situation that Prof. Seepe is talking about, of course, by and large, would also benefit political parties in terms of how they run their campaigns, because ultimately they can take credit for whatever deliverables that communities get in the end, because, you know, the vote is seen as being so synonymous with service delivery. So I am voting to get a house. I am voting to make sure that my area is prioritized with, you know, with the delivery of water or other basic services, when in fact it's just part of how the system of government works, and it should be that way regardless of which political party is in charge.
Indeed, Kathy, you couldn't have phrased it any better. In fact, this is a time when political parties ought to be stepping up to the fore and showcasing whatever achievements that they have made in the past 5 years. Instead, what we're seeing is them making more or additional promises in terms of what they think they can deliver without being reminded as to what promises they had made in the past, which promises they had failed to deliver on. And it is interesting that voters also seem to be as forgetful as politicians would wish everybody to be, because we need to be reminding politicians in terms of the promises that they've made in the past, and make sure that we check them. We put them on the line so far as asking them what it is that they failed to deliver, and why they failed to deliver, and why we should be actually maybe giving another person a chance to, or another party a chance to actually deliver. But having said that, this is also, and just linking on Professor Seepe's point, this is a sad indictment on the IEC, particularly. Obviously, political parties are also responsible, because voter education seems to have been sitting in the background. Nobody's really taking voter education seriously, and it is therefore disappointing when you hear voters or potential voters saying, we are not going to go to the polls, we are withholding our votes because we are unhappy about this and the other non-delivery issues, when in fact this is a time when they ought to be able to go to the polls to punish those who fail to deliver on the promises that they committed to. The last instance, the elections happened. So again, voter education is not an event. It is a process that the IEC ought to embrace and make sure that you don't wait for an election cycle for voter education to happen. In fact, even now, you hardly ever see any ads or any communication from the IEC articulating the importance of voter education, the importance of making sure that the ballot, as Professor Seepe says, is a potent tool, is an instrument that should be used and not to disrupt and bar, as you reported, 53 polling stations from opening or functioning properly on registration day. And unfortunately, that is what is going to take a while and some effort on the part of the IEC and political parties to remedy.
What role then do political parties have in this moment? Because the reality is that, you know, we've got less than 6-7 weeks before we get to the election, so not enough time to do the kind of work that would get the majority of people out on voting day. But what role can political parties be playing in this moment to try and get as many people out to vote as possible?
You need to create some excitement to start with within the electorate, to say we're looking forward to voting and we're going to cast our vote, and for this party or for this independent or individual, for whatever reasons that you might have come up with that you believe have made that individual earn your vote. And unfortunately, we seem to see political activity the moment elections have been proclaimed. We never see any voter education or any campaigning or any debate, real debate, going on any time other than after the proclamation of the election date. So that is something that is, unfortunately, it's a blot on our democratic processes insofar as the political economy being able to engage on issues throughout the course of the years, not just on an election year or an election month, as it is the case now. And yes, there's no time to do anything. And I would dare say that at this stage, there's no body or party that will sway anybody. Minds have been made. It's going to take it's going to be few people who might be swayed one way or the other. But otherwise, people are going to either vote along party lines, historical party lines, or withhold their votes.
Yeah, Professor Siepe, of course, the most difficult situation for South Africans to be in is where we have a great deal of people that are registered to vote who are just choosing to withhold their vote, choosing to not go out and vote on election day.
Well, what's unfortunate about that is that it does not lead to much change. It actually, you paralyze yourself by not participating. But most importantly, the parties have a responsibility right now. I mean, we can still talk about voter education even during this period, where we talk about that the voting gives you a chance to make a difference, but also that the parties will be judged on their believability and their credibility. If a party says we are going to build so many houses, you will find that that promise had been made in the past. And the voters must ask, why do you have to believe it this time? And if you have a party that was not in government, you'll also be interested in how that party had influenced policy. But you'll also be interested in what is the capacity of that party to deliver. Because it is very easy for parties to make promises. But I do think that the voters right now need to be a bit rigorous to say these promises were made. What have you done? And if you are in opposition, how did you bring about policy or push for policy that would advance the interests of the majority, especially the poor? Because in this country, we still have a country that some former president make it defined as a country, or South Africa as being a country of two nations. And in that description, he was talking about the inequalities, about poverty on one side and opulence on the other. The whole idea of having Sandton and Alexander, having Cape Town and the cities a center, and having the poor places like Khayelitsha. Those are the issues that the voters will have to ask. Who is best? Which party has the capacity and orientation and also track record to be able to deliver on these issues? And we've seen even in the past some parties had said, vote for us because we'll do it better. But it's unfortunate that it is only at this level of delivery. But we should be taking it at the high level. But what is important right now is whether the party's message can speak to what people are dealing with. At the moment, we've seen the disruption around electricity. But what has been unfortunate is that in Soweto, the people could have actually said which party has been in power and why has it failed to deliver. And now this party goes to the people during election time. Suddenly that party says, will deliver electricity. The voters should be asking, where were you all this time? Because the electricity has not gone down in the last 2 weeks or months. People have experienced absence of electricity in their lives for longer than that. So those are the questions that they must actually put to the politicians.
Political analyst Professor Sipho Siepe and political commentator Tabo Khas, let me thank you both for your time tonight on News at Prime.